What happens when a quiet 12-year-old girl takes her seat in first class only to be told she doesn't belong there? What if the very people meant to ensure her safety became the ones trying to push her out? And what if, in the middle of that silent storm, the girl's father watching from the ground wasn't just any parent, but the man who actually owns the entire airline? This is the story of Selena Moore, a child who carried herself with dignity in the face of humiliation at 30,000 feet. It's the story of a flight attendant who crossed the line, a cabin divided between silence and courage, and a world watching through the lens of a live stream that would soon reach millions. But here's the question that lingers when your very presence is treated like a disruption. How do you hold on to your place, your voice, your worth? Stay with us, because this isn't just about one seat on one plane. It's about justice, dignity, and the power of standing firm when everything tells you to shrink. If you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Selena Moore's sneakers squeaked softly on the polished floor of Terminal C as she rolled her backpack behind her. She was 12, though at that moment she felt both older and younger than her years. The excitement of her first solo trip had filled her chest all morning, but as she approached the glowing first-class sign, her stomach fluttered with the kind of nerves that felt like butterflies and thunder mixed together. She checked her ticket again. Seat 2A, first class, NorthStar Airways Flight 7018 to New York. She whispered it under her breath, letting the words anchor her like a charm she had to recite. Seat 2A, first class. She clutched the boarding pass tightly, fingers damp, determined not to lose it. At the gate, a neatly dressed woman with a sharp bun and even sharper eyes waited like a guardian at a fortress. The name tag pinned on her navy blazer read Claudia Harris. Claudia's smile was practiced, corporate, but when her eyes landed on Selena, it faltered for just a second, quick enough to miss if you weren't paying attention. Selena noticed. She always noticed. Boarding pass. Sweetheart, Claudia asked, voice pitched in that sing-song way adults sometimes use when they assume you don't fully belong in a serious place. Selena extended the ticket with both hands. Like an offering. Claudia scanned it, her brows pulled together. She scanned it again. First class. Huh. Claudia's lips twisted. Not quite a smile. Are you sure this is yours? Heat rushed into Selena's face. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to say, yes, it's mine. Yes, I belong here. Instead, her voice emerged small but steady. Yes, my dad booked it for me. I'm traveling to New York. Claudia tilted her head, studying her as if Selena were a puzzle piece jammed into the wrong box. Traveling alone. Yes, Selena said, trying to make her voice firmer. The line of passengers behind her began to fidget. A businessman in a gray suit shifted impatiently, glancing at his watch. The murmurs of rolling luggage and boarding calls pressed like static around them. Claudia leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not enough that others couldn't overhear. Sweetheart, first class is a very special cabin. Sometimes kids make mistakes. Maybe you should check your ticket again. Selena's stomach tightened. She looked at the crisp print 2A. First. She knew she was right. She knew her father's voice echoing in her head. You carry more than a ticket. Selena, you carry your name. Don't let anyone shrink you. Still, she swallowed hard. This is my ticket, she said, barely above a whisper. Claudia straightened. Step aside for now. Okay, we'll get this sorted. She gestured to the carpet's edge, where a strip of shadow lay just outside the first-class lane. The businessman behind Selena stepped forward immediately, flashing his pass. Claudia's tone shifted like the flip of a switch, bright, welcoming, deferential. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Jameson. First class to the left." She waved him through with a smile that had been denied to Selena. Selena felt the sting of it, the contrast, the subtle dismissal. She hugged her backpack closer, shifting to the side as more passengers flowed past. Each greeted warmly, each accepted without question. Her heart hammered. Was it her sneakers, her braids tied in two puffs her age? Or was it the shade of her skin that made Claudia look at her differently? She tried to calm the storm in her head, telling herself, maybe it's just procedure. Maybe she treats everyone this way. But she knew better. She'd seen enough in her 12 years to recognize the look, the doubt disguised as professionalism. The terminal air was cold, but her palms were sweaty. She wanted to disappear into her backpack, to avoid the eyes of the passengers who glanced at her curiously as they boarded. Behind her, the line dwindled. Soon, only economy passengers filled the waiting area. Selena was still standing there, holding her pass, watching as the gate to first class seemed to close invisibly around her. She thought of her grandmother in New York, recovering from surgery, waiting for her granddaughter to arrive with stories and laughter. She thought of her father, Adrian Moore, reminding her not to be afraid, telling her she was strong enough to travel alone. Her heart whispered, "Don't call Dad. Don't ruin this by needing him. You can do this." But another voice, the one that crept in when she felt most small, hissed, "Maybe she's right. Maybe you don't belong here. Maybe you should just take an economy seat and avoid the trouble." Selena blinked hard, fighting the sting of tears. Just then, a boy with a phone angled upward paused near the gate. He looked maybe 20, with dark hair under a baseball cap, his thumb moving quickly as the red circle of a livestream glowed on his screen. His name tag on a backpack strap read Jordan Lee. Selena caught the lens catching her face. For a flicker of a second, her humiliation was no longer private, it was public. Jordan's voice, low but audible, floated out. "They're telling this kid she can't sit in first class even though her ticket says 2A. Selena's pulse jumped. The world was watching now. Claudia noticed too. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the boy with annoyance. But she didn't stop him. Not yet. Selena shifted her weight, fighting the urge to run, fighting the urge to vanish. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, clutching the boarding pass like a banner. She was Adrian Moore's daughter. She had a right to that seat. Still, the question gnawed at her as Claudia called for a supervisor on the intercom. Her voice calm, rehearsed passenger verification required at gate C-17. Would anyone believe her? Or would she remain stranded on the carpet between belonging and exclusion? While the minutes slipped by, the boarding door hissed as it opened wider for another group. Claudia gestured smoothly for them to pass. Selena stood frozen. Her seat, Dutsuo, was waiting only a few steps beyond. Yet it felt farther than the horizon. Cliffhanger. Claudia turned back to her, eyes cool, and said firmly, "You'll need to step aside until we can confirm. First class isn't for everyone." Selena shifted her backpack against her shoulder, still standing at the edge of the boarding lane. Around her, the hum of the terminal swelled and dipped, punctuated by boarding calls echoing through the loudspeakers. A family rushed past, parents juggling strollers and snacks, while a flight attendant scanned their tickets without hesitation. Selena looked down at the crisp boarding pass clutched in her damp hand. The words printed on it hadn't changed. 2O, first class, NorthStar Airways. But the way people looked at her made her doubt what her own eyes confirmed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. For a second, her heart leapt. It might be Dad checking in. She considered ignoring it, but the buzzing persisted until she pulled it out. A single text glowed on the screen. Call me when you land. Be strong. Selena, you've got this. The words wrapped around her chest like a warm scarf. Her father's voice played in her mind, deeper and steadier than the noise of the terminal. Adrian Moore never needed to raise his voice to be heard. People leaned in when he spoke. He had told her 100 times that she was stronger than she knew. He had told her that carrying the Moore name meant carrying both a legacy and a responsibility. She remembered his words from the night before, as he tucked her ticket into her travel pouch. You carry more than a seat number, he said. You carry dignity. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. At the time, she had rolled her eyes, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly she loved when he said things like that. They made her feel like she was stepping into something larger than herself. Now, those words echoed in her ears like armor. She straightened her spine. She would not call him. Not yet. She wanted to prove she could do this on her own. She had begged him to let her travel alone. She wanted the adventure, the independence, the story to tell her friends at school. If she called him now, it would feel like admitting defeat. But beneath that determination, a whisper of doubt kept gnawing. What if Claudia was right? What if she had been placed in the wrong seat by mistake? What if she was embarrassing herself, clinging to something she had no right to? Her cheeks burned. She pressed the boarding pass tighter in her palm, as if squeezing it could turn paper into proof strong enough to silence every doubt. Jordan Lee shifted closer, his phone still raised. His livestream was subtle, not flashy, but the small red icon glowed in the corner. Selena glimpsed the screen. The comments were already pouring in. She's a kid. Let her sit down. This looks wrong. Someone call her parents. This is discrimination right here. Her throat tightened. Strangers were watching her humiliation play out in real time. She didn't know if that made her feel safer or more exposed. The businessman who had breezed past earlier sat visible through the boarding door, already sipping a glass of champagne. He glanced toward the gate, his expression unreadable, then turned back to his phone as though the small drama at the entrance was beneath him. Selena closed her eyes. She imagined her grandmother's apartment in New York, the smell of lavender lotion, the sound of jazz drifting from the old radio. She pictured her grandmother's smile, the way her eyes lit up whenever Selena entered the room. That was the reason she was here, the reason she needed to get on this plane. Her grandmother was recovering from heart surgery, and Selena had begged her father to let her visit. It wasn't just about comfort. It was about proving she was brave enough to fly alone, brave enough to step into responsibility. But bravery felt slippery now. Bravery felt like a word written in chalk, already smudging under Claudia's skeptical gaze. Claudia tapped her headset, speaking quietly into the mic. Selena couldn't catch the exact words, but she heard the phrase verification request. Claudia's voice was calm, professional, practiced, as if she were handling a lost bag rather than a 12-year-old girl with a valid ticket. Selena shifted from one foot to the other, suddenly aware of every eye that lingered. A couple whispered nearby, their brows furrowed. A teenager in earbuds looked up briefly, then back at his phone. The entire terminal seemed to pulse with a strange energy, like the tension before a storm breaks. She considered walking away, slipping into the economy line, disappearing into anonymity. She could avoid the conflict, avoid the shame. Maybe her father would never know. Maybe no one would ever mention it. But another part of her, the part that carried Adrian's steady voice in her blood, refused to move. To step away would mean agreeing with Claudia's doubt, agreeing with every look that said you don't belong. Her heart pounded, her fists clenched. She didn't feel brave, but she stood her ground anyway. Jordan's voice cut through the air. Sharper now. She has the ticket. Why are you keeping her here? His phone caught Claudia's stiff smile, her careful tone as she repeated, We're just confirming her information. Sir, please be patient. Selena swallowed. She wanted to speak, to tell Jordan she was okay, that she didn't need rescuing, but the words lodged in her throat. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her father. Remember, courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just not stepping back. She exhaled slowly. She could do this. She had to. A minute stretched into 5. The boarding door beeped with each new scan. The last first-class passenger walked through. Now only Selena remained. Claudia's expression had hardened into something polite but immovable. Selena caught her own reflection in the gate's glass wall, a small figure with braids, a backpack, and eyes that burned brighter than she realized. For a moment, she didn't see a child. She saw someone holding the line, refusing to vanish. The weight of expectations pressed heavy, but somewhere inside that weight was also strength. Her father's voice whispered again, You don't need to be rescued. Selena, you only need to be recognized. Claudia finally looked up from her screen. We're still waiting for confirmation, she said. Her voice clipped. Why don't you take a seat until we call you? Selena didn't move. She stood rooted, her boarding pass still clutched like a flag. Somewhere behind her, Jordan's phone dinged as thousands more viewers tuned in. The quiet storm was becoming louder. Selena took a breath, lifted her chin, and met Claudia's eyes. The space between them filled with an unspoken challenge. Would Claudia continue to treat her as invisible? Or would the truth of her ticket and the truth of who she was finally be enough? The answer would have to wait. The intercom crackled to life above them, supervisor requested at gate C-17. The stage was set. Selena's legs ached from standing in the same spot for what felt like forever, though it had only been minutes. She shifted her weight, the strap of her backpack digging into her shoulder. Her boarding pass was damp from her palm, the ink beginning to smudge at the corners. Still, she held onto it tightly, refusing to let go. The gate area had grown quieter now that most of the first-class passengers were seated. A hush settled, broken only by the muffled announcements from other gates and the occasional roll of a suitcase across the tile. Every sound felt magnified, like the tap of Claudia's heels as she paced behind the counter, or the click of her keyboard as she typed something into the computer. Selena wanted to believe that Claudia was simply doing her job, that this was just some strange glitch in the system. But she had seen how Claudia smiled at Mr. Jameson, the businessman with the gray suit and the champagne now resting in his hand, in seat 1B. She had seen how easily the other passengers had been waved through. The difference was too sharp to ignore. Jordan Lee angled his phone slightly higher, making sure Selena remained in frame. His livestream chat scrolled quickly, comments flying by faster than she could read. Why are they treating her like this? She has the ticket. This is messed up. Someone call corporate. Selena caught bits of the words, her stomach twisting. Strangers she would never meet were watching her humiliation play out like a show. She wanted to shrink into herself, to disappear. But another part of her thought, maybe this is good. Maybe if enough people see, they can't ignore it. Claudia finally looked up from her screen, her expression composed, almost bored. "All right," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "We're going to need additional verification before we can seat you in first class." Selena's voice cracked as she answered, "But my ticket." Claudia cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Sometimes mistakes happen. Sweetheart, I need you to step aside while we work this out. Economy is boarding soon, and there should be room there for you." The words hit Selena like a slap. Economy. As if her paid ticket, her father's careful planning, her own sense of independence could be brushed aside with one patronizing suggestion. "I'm not supposed to be in economy," Selena said, her voice firmer now, though her knees trembled. "My seat is 2A. Claudia's eyes hardened, her tone clipped. "Listen, first class isn't for everyone. I'll need to speak to a supervisor about this." The air thickened with silence. Passengers nearby glanced over, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Some shook their heads and kept walking. Others lingered, sensing the tension. Jordan's voice rang out again, stronger than before. "She has the boarding pass. Look, it says 2A. Why are you trying to move her?" His phone tilted toward the slip of paper in Selena's hand, broadcasting the truth to hundreds, then thousands of viewers. Claudia's smile froze. "Sir, please don't interfere with airline procedure." "Procedure," Jordan scoffed, his voice rising. "Or prejudice." The word hung in the air like a spark ready to ignite. Selena's chest tightened. She wasn't sure if she wanted Jordan to keep pushing, or if she wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. A deep voice broke through the moment. "What seems to be the problem here?" Selena turned to see a tall man in his 50s stepping forward, his salt and pepper hair catching the fluorescent light. His suit was simple but well-tailored, his demeanor calm yet commanding. His eyes landed on Selena with recognition. "Selena Moore," he said gently. She blinked, startled. "Yes." The man smiled warmly. "I'm Ethan Park. I know your father." Relief flooded her chest so suddenly she nearly sagged with it. She had met Ethan once, briefly, at her father's office. He was a longtime advisor, someone her father trusted deeply. His presence felt like a lifeline in the storm. Ethan turned to Claudia, his tone polite but firm. "This young lady's ticket is correct. I'll be happy to vouch for her." Claudia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, with respect, we have to follow security protocols. We can't just take someone's word." Ethan's voice cut through, steady as steel. "I'm not just someone. I've worked alongside Adrian Moore for 20 years. If this ticket says 2A, then she belongs in 2A. End of discussion." The name landed like a thunderclap. A few passengers glanced up from their seats, murmurs spreading. Adrian Moore was a name that carried weight, though not everyone knew why. Claudia hesitated, clearly unsettled, but she still tried to hold her ground. "Our procedures exist for a reason. I have to be cautious. It's unusual for a child to be seated in first class alone." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Unusual doesn't mean invalid. The only unusual thing here is your insistence on questioning her when the evidence is right in front of you." He gestured to the ticket in Selena's hand. Selena's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to hug Ethan for stepping in, but she also felt a sting of frustration. Why did it take his voice for her truth to carry weight? Why wasn't her own word enough? The boarding door opened again, and a man in uniform stepped out. His epaulets gleamed with captain's bars. His name tag read Captain Marcus Alvarez. His eyes swept over the small scene at the gate. His brow furrowed. "What's going on here?" he asked. Claudia straightened instantly, her posture snapping into formality. "Captain, We have a situation. This child is attempting to board first class alone, and her documentation appears unusual. Selena bristled at the word unusual, as though her presence itself was suspect. Ethan stepped forward smoothly. Her documentation is valid. I can assure you this young woman belongs in 2A. There's no situation except the one being manufactured here. The captain looked between Claudia, Ethan, and Selena. His jaw tightened. He rubbed a hand across his chin, clearly torn. We're behind schedule already, he muttered. I can't delay the flight much longer. Selena's heart sank. Schedule, efficiency, on-time performance. Were those worth more than her dignity? She wanted to scream, to cry, to force them to see her. Instead, she stood quietly, clutching her boarding pass until her knuckles ached. Jordan's phone caught every second, broadcasting Captain Alvarez's hesitation to the world. The comments exploded. This is outrageous. Let her board. Why is a child being treated like a criminal? Finally, with a sigh, the captain nodded. Seat her. Let's get this flight moving. Claudia's smile didn't reach her eyes as she turned back to Selena. Very well. Follow me. Her tone was clipped, her movement stiff as she led Selena down the jet bridge. Selena's steps echoed on the carpet, her heart thudding with every one. She should have felt relief, but the victory tasted bitter. She had won a seat, but lost something else in the process. Her sense that belonging could ever come without question. She slid into 2A, her backpack tucked under the seat. The leather smelled of polish, the cabin hushed and gleaming. But Claudia's shadow loomed, her presence a reminder that the battle was not over. Selena pressed her forehead against the cool window, staring at the tarmac lights outside. She breathed slowly, fighting the sting in her eyes. She had her seat, but at what cost? Cliffhanger. Behind her. Claudia muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Selena to hear. Kids like that don't belong up here. The leather of seat 2A was smooth and cool beneath Selena's palms. She should have felt proud to be there. But instead, her body buzzed with unease. The hum of the aircraft around her sounded louder than usual, the click of overhead bins, the shuffle of feet, the quiet rustle of seatbelts snapping into place. She was in her seat. Yes, but she didn't feel welcomed. She felt watched. Claudia Harris passed through the aisle, her smile ready for the businessman in 1B, softer for the couple in 3A and 3C, but sharp as glass when her eyes flicked over Selena. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The chill of disapproval clung to every movement. Selena adjusted her backpack under the seat, pretending to focus on her book. Her fingers fumbled across the cover, not really turning the page. She could feel Claudia's presence like a shadow overhead, and every second stretched into something heavier. Across the aisle. Ethan Park unbuckled his jacket and placed it neatly over his lap. He caught Selena's eye and offered a small, reassuring nod. His calmness steadied her, even if just a little. She returned the nod, silently grateful he had appeared when he did. Still, her chest ached with the memory of Claudia's words at the gate. First class isn't for everyone. Selena knew what the words meant. She had seen the way Claudia looked at her, the hesitation, the doubt. She thought of her father again, his reminder that courage was sometimes just refusing to back down. But courage, she realized, wasn't always loud. Sometimes courage was sitting still, not running, not shrinking, even when every part of her wanted to disappear. The cabin door closed with a solid thud. The sound echoed like a gavel striking wood. No turning back now. Jordan Lee, The young man with the live stream was 2 rows back. Selena could feel his phone angled slightly upward, catching snippets of the scene. She didn't know how many people were still watching, but the thought of unseen eyes gave her a strange comfort. Even if Claudia tried to pretend nothing had happened, someone out there knew the truth. Captain Marcus Alvarez's voice came over the intercom, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard NorthStar Airways Flight 718, service to New York. Flight time today will be approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for departure." The words should have settled her nerves, but instead they tightened the knot in her stomach. She wasn't afraid of flying. She had flown many times before with her father. She was afraid of the silence that followed the way Claudia and some passengers seemed to see her as an intruder who had slipped past the gates of privilege. As the plane began its slow pushback from the gate, Ethan leaned slightly toward the aisle. His voice was low, meant only for her. "You're doing well. Selena, don't let her rattle you." Selena nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "She doesn't think I belong here," she whispered. Ethan's eyes softened. "That's her problem, not yours. Remember who you are. Remember whose daughter you are." The words carried a weight that warmed her chest. Still, doubt lingered. She pressed her book closed, staring at the seat back in front of her as the engines roared to life. The plane rumbled down the taxiway, the vibration humming through the floor beneath her shoes. She gripped the armrest, trying to focus on the steady rhythm of the engines instead of the unease curling in her stomach. Claudia moved down the aisle, checking seatbelts. When she reached Selena's row, her smile faltered again. "Seatbelt secure?" she asked, the words crisp, devoid of warmth. "Yes," Selena replied quietly. Claudia's gaze lingered a second longer. Then she moved on, her perfume trailing behind her. Selena exhaled slowly, unclenching her hands. The aircraft lifted off, pressing her gently back into her seat. The city below shrank into a tapestry of lights. Normally, she loved this moment, the feeling of leaving the ground, of rising above everything. Tonight it felt different, like climbing into a sky full of questions she didn't know how to answer. As the seatbelt sign pinged off, Claudia reappeared with a tray, moving through the cabin to offer drinks. She leaned over to Mr. Jameson in 1B with a smile that lit her face. "Champagne for you, sir," he nodded, accepting the glass with a chuckle. Then Claudia turned to Selena. The smile faded. "Would you like some water?" The word sounded more like a requirement than an offer. She didn't bother to ask about juice, soda, or the sparkling options given to the others. Selena nodded, not trusting her voice. Claudia placed a small plastic cup on her tray and moved on without another word. Her throat tightened. She wasn't surprised anymore. She was simply tired, tired of being doubted, tired of being treated like less. Ethan leaned over again, his tone gentle but insistent. "Don't shrink yourself. Selena, you have every right to be here. Don't let her make you feel small." Selena wanted to believe him, but inside, her thoughts churned. Maybe if I were older, dressed differently, or looked like the others, she wouldn't question me. Maybe it's something about me that's wrong. She hated herself for thinking it, but the thought lingered like smoke. From the corner of her eye, she saw the first officer, Riley Thompson, slip out of the cockpit briefly. She carried a clipboard, scanning the rows with quick, observant eyes. When she noticed Selena's untouched cup of water, she hesitated, then crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "You okay, sweetheart?" Riley asked, her voice softer, kinder. Selena nodded quickly. though the lump in her throat made it hard to speak. Riley offered a small smile. If you need anything, don't hesitate to press the call button. We'll make sure you're looked after. The kindness felt like a lifeline, brief but real. Selena managed a quiet, "Thank you," as Riley disappeared back into the cockpit. Ethan whispered, "See, not everyone here is blind." Selena swallowed, her eyes stinging. She forced herself to focus on the truth she was in her seat. She had allies, and the flight was moving forward. But still, Claudia's shadow loomed large. Jordan's livestream captured another murmur from the comments. "This isn't over. People need to see how she's being treated." Selena leaned back, her forehead resting against the cool window. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, dotted with stars. She closed her eyes, willing herself to be stronger than her fear. But even as she tried to steady her breathing, Claudia's words echoed again in her head. First class isn't for everyone. Selena opened her eyes and stared at the reflection in the glass. She was here. She wasn't going anywhere. Yet somewhere deep inside, she knew the storm had only begun. Cliffhanger. As Claudia passed her row once more, Selena heard the quietest whisper, meant only for herself, but caught all the same. Let's see how long this lasts. The hum of the engines filled the cabin with a steady vibration that usually comforted Selena, but tonight it felt like a reminder of her isolation. First class was quiet, almost serene. Reclining seats whispered as passengers adjusted themselves. Champagne glasses clinked softly, and overhead lights glowed a gentle amber. Everything around her was designed to feel special. Yet somehow it felt like she had snuck into a party where no one wanted her. She stared at the small cup of water Claudia had left on her tray. It looked almost mocking in its plainness. Around her, passengers enjoyed sparkling sodas, wine, or the elegant cocktails that Claudia poured with visible care. The man in 1B had already been offered a refill. Selena's plastic cup remained untouched. She thought about pressing the call button, just to test if Claudia would respond with the same warmth she showed others, but fear curled in her stomach. What if Claudia snapped at her again? What if asking for more only made her seem greedy or out of place? Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and stayed silent. Ethan leaned slightly toward her. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. Selena shook her head. The truth was, she hadn't eaten much before boarding. Nerves had stolen her appetite. But now, hunger gnawed faintly in her stomach. Still, she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to give Claudia another reason to judge her. A cart rolled down the aisle, the quiet squeak of wheels against the carpet. Claudia and another attendant worked together to serve dinner. Plates clinked as trays of grilled salmon, roasted chicken, and vegetarian pasta were set in front of passengers. The smell of garlic butter filled the air, making Selena's mouth water. When the cart reached her row, Claudia barely paused. "Child's meal wasn't requested," she said flatly, as if announcing a fact carved in stone. She handed Selena a prepackaged snack box, the kind normally given in economy crackers, cheese, and a small packet of cookies. Selena's cheeks burned. She hadn't asked for a child's meal. She wanted what everyone else had. She wanted to belong. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he said firmly. "This young lady has a first-class ticket. She deserves the same options as the rest of us." Claudia's eyes narrowed. "Our records don't show a meal preference. This is standard for unaccompanied minors." Selena's fingers trembled as she lifted the small box. The packaging crinkled loudly in the hushed cabin, drawing a few curious glances. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the seat, to avoid the pitying eyes of strangers. But another part of her, the part her father had nurtured, burned with quiet anger. Why did she have to accept less? Why did she have to be made small when she had done nothing wrong? Jordan's phone tilted slightly, capturing the exchange, the glow of his live stream reflected in the window. Selena could almost feel the ripple of voices beyond the screen, unseen but present. The comments scrolled fast. Unbelievable! She paid for first class. Not a kid's snack. They're treating her like she doesn't matter. Selena looked down at the crackers in her hand. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to sit tall. She opened the box slowly, deliberately, as though claiming it as her choice rather than her punishment. She popped a cracker into her mouth, the dry crunch loud in her ears. It didn't taste like shame. It tasted like defiance. Ethan reached for his glass of water, his movements calm, but his eyes flickered with fire. "Selena," he said softly, "you don't owe anyone an apology for being here." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she believed him. Inside, her thoughts twisted into knots. Maybe it would have been easier if she had just taken an economy seat. Maybe it wasn't worth the stares, the whispers, the subtle cruelties wrapped in polite smiles. Her grandmother's face rose in her memory, warm and proud. "You are enough. Selena, you've always been enough." She clung to that memory as the cabin darkened slightly, lights dimming for the dinner service. The other passengers chatted softly, forks scraping against plates, glasses clinking. The normalcy of their experience contrasted sharply with her silence. She lifted her gaze and noticed Riley Thompson, the first officer, emerging again from the cockpit. She walked down the aisle, scanning the cabin as if checking on things. When her eyes landed on Selena's snack box, her brow furrowed slightly. She crouched near the seat, lowering her voice. "Is that all they gave you?" Riley asked. Selena hesitated, then nodded. Riley's lips pressed together. "Hold on." She stood, walked briskly back toward the galley, and returned a moment later with a proper meal tray chicken with roasted vegetables, a small salad, and a roll still warm from the oven. She set it gently in front of Selena. "There," Riley said softly. "That looks better." Selena's chest swelled with relief. She whispered, "Thank you." Riley offered a quick smile before disappearing back into the cockpit. Claudia's eyes flicked toward Selena, sharp and unreadable, but she said nothing. Selena took a slow bite of the chicken. The flavors blossomed on her tongue. But more than the food, it was the gesture that nourished her, the reminder that not everyone saw her as less. Jordan's livestream chat exploded with comments of praise for Riley. "That's how you do your job. Finally, someone with compassion. Protect Riley at all costs." Selena glanced back toward Jordan, their eyes meeting briefly. He gave a small nod, as if to say, "They see you. You're not alone." She turned back to her meal, the knot in her stomach loosening just a little. As the flight wore on, silence settled around her again. But it was a different silence this time. Not the silence of exclusion, but the silence of endurance. She was learning, moment by moment, that strength wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes strength was just taking the seat you had paid for, eating the meal you deserved, and refusing to be erased. Still, Claudia's muttered words haunted her. Kids like that don't belong up here. The sting of them burrowed deep, threatening to unravel her calm. She looked out the window, the dark expanse of sky stretching endlessly. The stars shimmered faintly against the velvet black. For a moment, she imagined they were all watching, tiny witnesses scattered across the universe, reminding her that she mattered. Her heart beat slower, steadier. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, so softly no one else could hear, "I belong here." But as the engines hummed and the plane soared higher, a shadow of doubt still lingered. Would that truth hold until landing, or would Claudia find another way to strip it from her cliffhanger? Behind her, Jordan's phone buzzed with a notification. His live stream had passed 50,000 viewers. The story of the girl in seat 2A was no longer just hers. It was becoming everyone's. The cabin lights dimmed after dinner, soft glows casting shadows across the rows. Passengers adjusted their seats, pulled out blankets, or tucked earbuds into their ears. For many, it was time to relax. But for Selena, the silence was heavy, filled with unspoken tension. She traced her finger along the edge of the tray table, her thoughts circling endlessly. She had eaten the meal Riley brought her, every bite steadying her nerves, but the shame still lingered. Shame that she hadn't been offered the meal at first. Shame that she had doubted herself enough to nearly accept less than she deserved. Her stomach churned as she replayed Claudia's words in her mind. "Kids like that don't belong up here." The phrase clung like burrs, cutting deeper the more she tried to brush them away. She leaned against the window, staring into the dark sky. The stars were faint, blurred by the glass and distance, but she tried to focus on them. Her father always said stars were reminders, tiny flames refusing to be swallowed by the dark. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. But then, just as she began to drift, she heard Claudia's voice again. This time, louder, not whispered, honestly. "It makes the whole cabin uncomfortable. A seat like that wasted on someone who doesn't even fit the part." Selena froze. Her pulse spiked. She wasn't sure if Claudia realized she could hear, but the words carried clearly enough from where the attendant spoke with her colleague near the galley. Her chest tightened. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't procedure. Claudia had meant it all along. She gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wanted to stand, to shout, to demand why. But the fear of drawing more stares locked her in place. Across the aisle, Ethan shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. He had heard, too. He placed his glass down deliberately, then rose slowly, every movement precise. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but carrying through the cabin. "Would you care to repeat?" The conversations paused. A few passengers turned their heads, sensing the tension. Claudia stiffened, her professional smile flickering. "Sir, I was speaking privately with my colleague." Ethan's tone sharpened. "You were speaking loud enough for the entire row to hear. You just told a colleague that a child doesn't belong in her seat, a seat she has a paid ticket for." Selena's face burned. She wanted to sink into the upholstery, but at the same time, something inside her swelled with gratitude. Ethan was standing for her when her own voice felt trapped. Claudia straightened, her chin lifting. "Sir, please sit down. We're in flight. I can assure you, everything is being handled according to protocol." Jordan's phone tilted forward, catching the entire exchange. His livestream comments scrolled in a blur, caught in 4K. "This is disgusting. She needs to be fired. Stay strong. Little one." Ethan didn't move. His voice dropped. Firm as stone. "You've humiliated this child from the moment she stepped to the gate. You've questioned her legitimacy, withheld proper service, and now you say she doesn't belong. That is not protocol. That is prejudice. The word landed in the air like a strike. Passengers exchanged uneasy looks. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak. Others leaned closer, curiosity sharpening. Selena's hands trembled, hidden under the tray table. Part of her wanted Ethan to stop before things escalated further. Another part wanted him to keep going, to expose every wound Claudia had inflicted. Claudia's lips curved into a tight smile, but her eyes flashed. "Sir, if you continue to disrupt, I will have to report this." "Report it," Ethan replied smoothly. "Report that you tried to remove a paying passenger because you didn't like how she looked. Report that you belittled a child and denied her the service everyone else receives. Go ahead." The quiet of the cabin deepened, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Selena's throat ached. She pressed her lips together, fighting the tears that threatened. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not now. She wanted to be strong. Her father's words rang again. "Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just not stepping back." She sat taller, shoulders squared, though her body quaked inside. Claudia stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping it firm. "Mr. Park, sit down. This discussion is over." Ethan didn't budge. "No, Miss Harris, this discussion is just beginning." For a moment, the air between them was electric, a quiet battle waged in posture and tone. Finally, Claudia spun on her heel, retreating to the galley with clipped steps. Selena exhaled shakily, realizing she had been holding her breath. Ethan sat again, his expression calm, though his fists clenched on the armrests. He leaned toward Selena, his voice low. "Just for her. You don't have to carry this alone. You're not invisible. Not while I'm here." Selena nodded, words caught in her throat. She wanted to say thank you, but what came out instead was a soft whisper. "Why does she hate me?" Ethan's face softened, pain flickering in his eyes. "She doesn't hate you. She hates what she refuses to understand. But that's not your burden to carry. That's hers." Selena turned back to the window, stars glittering faintly beyond the glass. She repeated the words in her head like a mantra. "Not my burden. Not my burden." Behind her, Jordan's phone buzzed again, his live stream now topping 70,000 viewers. His chat filled with demands. "Tag the airline CEO. Send this to the news. We'll make sure she's not silenced." Selena didn't see the comments, but she felt the shift in the air. The story was no longer just confined to the cabin. It was breaking beyond, rippling outward, ready to meet her father before she even landed. Cliffhanger. As the plane cut through the night sky, Claudia emerged from the galley, her smile brittle, her eyes sharp. She leaned toward Selena's row, her voice low but cutting. "Let's see how brave you are when the captain hears my report." The hum of the aircraft was steady, almost soothing for most of the passengers. But for Selena, each vibration in the floor felt like a countdown. Claudia's words lingered in her ears. "When the captain hears my report," the sentence clung to her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. She glanced across the aisle at Ethan. His calm expression had returned, though his eyes were sharp, alert, watching. He gave her a small nod, as if to say, "You're not alone in this." Still, fear twisted inside her. She thought about her father again. What would he want her to do? Speak, stay silent. Call him. She imagined his steady voice reminding her, "Don't let them push you out of your seat. Your dignity isn't up for debate." Her fingers tightened around the armrest. Claudia disappeared into the galley, her heels clicking against the floor. A few minutes later, she emerged with Captain Marcus Alvarez in tow. His tall frame and crisp uniform gave him authority that instantly silenced the low murmur of conversation in the cabin. "Good evening," the captain said, his tone measured. "I understand we have a situation here." Selena's heart thudded painfully. All eyes turned toward her row. She shrank back slightly in her seat, wishing the floor would open and swallow her whole. Claudia gestured toward Selena with a tilt of her chin. This passenger presented documentation that appeared questionable at boarding. She has been disruptive, and there are concerns about her eligibility for this seat. Selena's stomach lurched. The words sliced through her like a blade. Questionable. Disruptive. Words chosen carefully to cast suspicion without proof. Ethan rose before Selena could speak, his voice calm but ringing with authority. "Captain, that's a gross misrepresentation. This young lady has a valid first-class ticket, Seat 2A. She has not been disruptive. The only disruption has been the repeated harassment from your crew." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, others leaned closer, sensing something significant was unfolding. Jordan's livestream tilted higher, capturing every second. The red light glowed brighter, his chat now racing at lightning speed. "Captain better fix this. She's 12, and they're treating her like a criminal. Tag the FAA." Captain Alvarez looked from Claudia to Ethan, then finally down at Selena. His eyes softened briefly, but he cleared his throat, keeping his tone neutral. "Miss, can you show me your boarding pass again?" Selena's hand shook as she pulled the slip of paper from her pocket. She held it out with both hands, forcing herself not to flinch. "Seat 2A, she whispered. The captain examined it, then looked at his tablet. After a moment, he nodded. "The boarding pass is valid." Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. Claudia stepped in quickly, her smile professional, but her words cutting. "Yes, Captain, but we have to consider passenger comfort. Some in the cabin have expressed concerns." Selena froze. Passenger comfort. Her eyes darted around, searching for faces of disapproval. Most passengers avoided her gaze. A few whispered behind their hands. She didn't know who Claudia was speaking for, or if she was simply inventing voices to back her claim. Ethan's voice sharpened. "Passenger comfort. You mean your comfort. Let's not twist this. No one here has a problem with this young lady except you." The businessman in 1B cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. "Well, it is unusual," he muttered. The words stung. Not as sharp as Claudia's, but enough to make Selena's cheeks flush hot. Ethan turned to him, his tone unwavering. "Unusual doesn't mean unwelcome. A child in first class isn't a problem unless you make it one." Silence followed. The businessman looked away, embarrassed. The captain exhaled, his patience thinning. "We are not going to debate this in front of the entire cabin. Miss Moore has a valid ticket. She will remain in her seat. End of discussion." For the first time since boarding, Selena felt a flicker of real safety. The captain had spoken, but even as the relief spread through her chest, she caught the tightness in Claudia's jaw, the storm simmering behind her eyes. Jordan's phone captured the captain's words, his chat exploding in celebration. Finally, justice. But watch her. Claudia isn't done. Selena leaned back into her seat, exhaling slowly. She wanted to melt into the upholstery, to let the moment pass. But her mind raced. She realized something important. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about one seat, one ticket. It was about every person who had ever been told, directly or indirectly, "You don't belong here." Ethan sat again. folding his hands calmly. "You handled yourself well," he murmured to her. Selena swallowed. "I didn't even say anything." "You didn't have to," Ethan replied softly. "Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. You stayed. That was enough." She looked down at her lap, letting his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe just being here, refusing to move, refusing to vanish, was its own form of defiance. But Claudia wasn't finished. Selena could feel it. The attendant's footsteps clipped against the aisle as she moved back to the galley, her shoulders stiff, her posture tense. Selena's pulse quickened. Minutes ticked by. The cabin settled again, but the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was charged, fragile, like glass ready to crack. Selena closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She pictured her grandmother's smile, her father's voice, the stars outside the window. "You belong here. You belong here." The intercom pinged. Claudia's voice filled the cabin, smooth and professional. But Selena heard the undercurrent. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your cooperation. We strive to ensure every passenger's comfort. If you have concerns, please don't hesitate to let us know." Selena's chest tightened. It wasn't an announcement. It was a warning cloaked as courtesy. Ethan leaned toward her again. "Don't let her rattle you. Remember, the truth's already out there, behind them." Jordan's phone buzzed again. His live stream had crossed 100,000 viewers. The story was trending now, a tidal wave building beyond the cabin. Selena didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was clear, the fight was no longer hidden. It was unfolding on a stage larger than she could have imagined. Cliffhanger. Claudia returned to her row, her eyes sharp as blades. She leaned closer, her smile thin. "Enjoy your seat while you can," she whispered. The cabin air felt heavier now, as if the oxygen itself carried the weight of every unspoken thought. Selena sat stiff in her seat, her small hands folded tightly in her lap. She could still feel Claudia's whisper curling in her ear like smoke. "Enjoy your seat while you can." Her chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. She told herself to be calm, to be steady. Her father's voice echoed again in memory. Sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes it's just not moving when they expect you to. She stayed still, even though inside she felt like she was unraveling. Across the aisle, Ethan Park adjusted his tie with calm precision. His eyes never left Claudia, tracking every movement she made in the galley. He leaned towards Selena slightly and said in a voice low enough for only her to hear, "She's grasping at straws now. Don't let her words get inside you." Selena nodded, though her throat was too tight to answer. Behind her. Jordan Lee angled his phone discreetly but firmly, making sure the live stream kept running. The comments were flooding in faster than ever, tagging every news outlet. "This is trending on Twitter. Stay strong. Little sis. We see you. Someone call her dad. This is insane." Selena didn't dare look back, but she could feel the invisible crowd gathering around her through that little lens. Strangers across the country, maybe even the world, were watching. She wondered what they saw: a scared kid too quiet to speak, or someone stronger than she knew. Claudia returned to the aisle, her heels clicking against the floor. She moved with the careful grace of someone who knew she was being observed. Her smile flickered on and off like a faulty light bulb, warm for one passenger, icy for the next. When she reached 1B, she leaned down and whispered something to Mr. Jameson. His brow furrowed, then his eyes flicked towards Selena with a mix of unease and discomfort. He nodded faintly before turning back to his phone. Selena caught the look. Her chest squeezed tight. She wanted to believe it was nothing, but the sting was sharp. Was Claudia poisoning the passengers against her one by one? Ethan saw it too. His voice cut through the quiet. If you have something to say, say it aloud, he told Claudia. Claudia straightened, her smile sharpening. I'm ensuring passenger comfort. Mr. Park. That's my duty. Ethan's reply was like steel. Your duty is safety and service, not gossip and slander. Several passengers shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but attentive. A woman in 3C leaned forward, her voice hesitant. Excuse me, but she's just a child. Why is this such a big deal? Claudia's eyes flashed. But before she could answer, another passenger, a man in 4A, spoke up. Because the crew made it one. The kid has her ticket. She belongs here. Let's move on. The cabin stirred with murmurs. Some passengers nodded in agreement. Others avoided eye contact, unwilling to take sides. Selena's heart beat faster. She hadn't expected anyone else to speak. The small voices of support wrapped around her like a thin blanket, fragile, but warming. Claudia's smile tightened further, but she turned away without responding. She strode back to the galley, her shoulders stiff, her movements sharper now. Jordan's livestream caught every second, his viewers flooding the chat with celebration. Finally, passengers stepping up. We've got witnesses now. She's not alone anymore. Selena swallowed hard. She wished she could thank them, every single one of them. But her voice was still trapped somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of fear and doubt. The plane cruised smoothly through the night, but the cabin was anything but calm. Conversations flickered in low tones. Some passengers glanced at Selena with sympathy, others with discomfort. She felt like every eye carried a question. Does she belong? Her gaze drifted to the window, stars glittering faintly in the distance. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, whispering so softly no one else could hear. I belong here. I belong here. Ethan's hand rested briefly on the armrest between them. Don't forget, he murmured. Selena closed her eyes, holding on to the words. Minutes later, Claudia reappeared, this time with a clipboard in hand. She stood tall at the front of the cabin, her voice clear. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to assure you that NorthStar Airways values every passenger's experience. If you have any concerns, please let me know directly. Her tone was polished, professional, but her eyes flicked toward Selena like daggers. Selena's stomach turned. She knew what Claudia was doing, trying to frame the situation as a matter of passenger comfort, not discrimination, trying to make Selena the source of disruption rather than the target. Jordan's phone angled upward, capturing the announcement. His livestream comments surged. Gaslighting 101. She's flipping the script. This is corporate damage control in real time. Selena's pulse raced. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth, but her voice felt locked behind her teeth. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice broke the tension. Excuse me, said the woman in 3C, louder this time. But I think what's making people uncomfortable isn't her, it's how she's being treated. The words hung in the air like a spark. The man in 4A nodded firmly. She has her seat. That's the end of it. Even Mr. Jameson in 1B shifted uncomfortably. Finally speaking, I don't like how this is being handled either. Let's just let the kid fly in peace. Selena's chest swelled, her eyes stinging with unexpected relief. People were standing up for her. Not everyone, not loudly, but enough. Claudia's mask cracked, just for a second. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing before she smoothed her smile back into place. "Thank you for your feedback," she said through clenched teeth. She retreated once more to the galley, her heels striking the floor like hammers. Ethan leaned toward Selena again. "See, the truth always finds its way out." Selena nodded slowly, her throat thick with emotion. For the first time since boarding, she felt something stronger than fear stirring inside her. Hope. She turned to the window again, watching the endless stretch of sky. Her father's words echoed louder now. "Your dignity isn't up for debate." Behind her, Jordan's phone buzzed wildly. His livestream had exploded past 200,000 viewers. News outlets were picking it up. Hashtags were forming. The story of the girl in 2A was no longer confined to this plane. It was airborne, unstoppable. Selena didn't know what awaited her when they landed, but she knew one thing for certain: the world was watching now. Cliffhanger. A soft ding cut through the cabin. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ms. Harris, please meet me in the cockpit at your earliest convenience." The chime from the intercom still echoed faintly when Claudia turned sharply on her heel. For the first time since boarding, her polished mask slipped. Her cheeks flushed with irritation as she marched toward the cockpit. Clipboard clutched like a shield. The cabin followed her with their eyes, a hush settling after her departure. Selena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her chest ached from keeping it in. She turned to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he's going to believe her?" Ethan studied her, his gaze steady. He already saw the truth. "Selena, he knows your ticket's valid. What he's doing now is deciding how to handle her." She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her ribs. She thought about the businessman in 1B, about the whispers, about the way Claudia had framed it as passenger comfort. Would the captain bend toward convenience or toward justice? Jordan's phone screen glowed a faint blue behind her, casting light across his determined expression. The chat scrolled faster than ever. Captain called her out. "She's done for. This better not end with them punishing the kid. We're sending this to CNN right now." Selena's pulse quickened. The thought of millions seeing her face, her silence, her humiliation, it terrified her. But at the same time, she felt a strange flicker of power. The truth wasn't trapped here. It was out in the open, bigger than Claudia, bigger even than the captain. The cockpit door clicked shut behind Claudia. For a moment, Selena imagined what was happening inside. She pictured Captain Alvarez standing tall, his jaw tight, questioning Claudia with that even, steady voice. She pictured Claudia defending herself, twisting her words into something smooth and professional. Her imagination played both sides of the argument at once, until her head spun. Ethan's calm voice pulled her back. "Selena, listen to me. Whatever happens in there, you've done nothing wrong. Don't let their words become your truth." Selena nodded faintly, but deep down, her heart whispered, "What if he sides with her? What if they make me leave?" Minutes passed like hours. The plane cruised steadily, the stars bright against the velvet night outside. Some passengers shifted restlessly, sensing the weight of what was happening just beyond the locked door. Others pretended to sleep, though their eyes flickered open whenever footsteps stirred. The woman in 3C leaned forward again, her voice soft but directed at Selena. "You're very brave." You know that Selena blinked, startled. "I don't feel brave." The woman smiled gently. "That's usually when you are." Her words warmed Selena's chest. a tiny light flickering against the darkness of doubt. "From behind," Jordan whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You're trending worldwide. They're calling you the girl in 2A. Selena's heart skipped. A nickname, a title. She wasn't sure if she wanted it, but she couldn't stop it now. The cockpit door opened at last. Claudia stepped out first. Her smile painted back on, but thinner now, stretched taut. Captain Alvarez followed, his expression unreadable. He walked down the aisle with the steady steps of a man weighing every word. The cabin hushed again. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain began, his voice calm, controlled, "I want to assure you that passenger safety and dignity remain our highest priority. I've spoken with Ms. Harris, and we've reviewed the matter." Selena's stomach nodded. She clutched the edge of her seat, bracing for the verdict. The captain's gaze landed on her. His expression softened, if only slightly. "Miss Moore is a valid first-class passenger. She will remain in her seat for the duration of the flight." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin, some relieved, some skeptical. Jordan's livestream caught the words clearly, his audience exploding in celebration. "Yes, justice on record. Clip this now." Selena exhaled shakily, her shoulders sagging with relief. She had won again. At least, on paper. But she saw Claudia's eyes, burning just behind that forced smile. "This wasn't over," the captain continued, his tone firm. "Ms. Harris has been reminded of our standards. I expect full professionalism for the remainder of this flight. That's all. With that," he turned back toward the cockpit, leaving Claudia alone in the aisle. For a long moment she stood frozen, her clipboard clutched tight. Then she turned sharply and strode back to the galley, her heels striking the floor in clipped, angry beats. The cabin slowly exhaled. Conversations resumed in cautious whispers. The woman in 3C gave Selena another encouraging nod. The man in 4A leaned back in his seat with a satisfied grunt. Even Mr. Jameson in 1B looked away sheepishly, as though embarrassed by his earlier words. Selena's chest loosened a little. She turned to Ethan, whispering, "Do you think it's really over?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "It's never over that quickly. But you've got more eyes on your side than she does now. Don't forget that." Selena nodded, though unease lingered. Claudia's silence was almost worse than her words. It felt like the stillness before a storm. She looked out the window again, stars scattered across the endless black. She thought of her father, how he never let injustice pass without shining a light on it. She wondered if he knew what was happening right now, if word had already reached him. Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket. She pulled it out, shielding the screen. A flood of notifications filled it, messages from friends, tags on social media, even a text from her cousin. "Is that you in the video?" Her heart pounded. The story had already reached the ground. Jordan leaned forward again, his voice urgent but steady. "Selena, listen. News outlets are picking it up. If she tries anything else, the world's gonna know in minutes. You've got more power than you think." Power. The word felt strange in her chest. She was 12. She didn't feel powerful. But maybe, just maybe, sitting here, refusing to move, refusing to vanish, that was its own kind of power. The flight continued, the minutes crawling forward. Claudia didn't return to Selena's row, but Selena could feel her gaze from the galley, sharp and bitter. Her stomach twisted again, but she straightened in her seat. Quietly, she whispered to herself, "I belong here." She repeated it until her heartbeat steadied. But as the engines roared and the plane pushed onward through the night, she knew the real test wasn't finished. The world was watching. Yes. But would justice hold all the way to landing cliffhanger in the galley? Selena caught sight of Claudia slipping on a headset, her voice low but urgent into the interphone. She couldn't hear the words, but the look on Claudia's face told her one thing: this fight was far from over. The cabin had settled into a tense rhythm after the captain's announcement, but the peace felt fragile, stretched thin like glass ready to shatter. Passengers whispered in low tones, some sneaking glances towards Selena, others keeping their eyes fixed on their screens as if pretending nothing unusual had happened. Selena sat rigid in seat 2A, her hands resting on her lap, every muscle taut. She replayed the captain's words again and again. She will remain in her seat. For a few moments, those words had wrapped her in safety. But Claudia's cold stare from the galley reminded her safety was temporary. Claudia stood with her headset pressed to her ear, her voice low into the interphone. Selena couldn't make out the words, but the sharp angles of Claudia's jaw and the tightness in her shoulders made the message clear. She was not finished. Ethan leaned closer, his voice calm but steady. She's cornered. That's why she's pushing harder. Don't let it shake you. Selena nodded faintly, though the knot in her stomach tightened. She thought of her father again, imagined what he might say if he were here. You don't need to fight every battle with fists or words. Selena. Sometimes just being unshaken is the loudest answer. Her fingers traced circles against the fabric of her seat, a small attempt to keep her nerves steady. The cockpit door clicked open again. This time, it wasn't the captain who emerged. It was Claudia, clipboard in hand, her smile taut and brittle. She cleared her throat, her voice rising just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "in the interest of transparency, I need to inform you that we are filing an incident report regarding a disruptive passenger in this cabin." A ripple of murmurs spread through the rows. Selena's breath caught. She knew exactly who Claudia meant. Ethan stood immediately. "No," he said firmly, his voice slicing through the quiet. "You will not twist this situation. The only disruption here has been your harassment of this child." Claudia's smile froze. "Mr. Park, please sit down. This is airline procedure." Jordan's live stream angled higher, capturing everything. His audience scrolled furiously. "Unbelievable. She's doubling down. Do not let this stand. We're sending this to the FAA right now." The woman in 3C rose halfway from her seat. "Excuse me, but she hasn't disrupted anything. I've watched this whole time. The girl has been silent, polite, and calm." The man in 4A joined in, his voice louder. "That's right. If anyone's disrupted the cabin, it's you. Even Mr. Jameson in 1B cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Honestly, I have to agree. This doesn't look good." Claudia's composure cracked for a moment. Her eyes narrowed, her smile fading. "You're all misunderstanding. I have to ensure safety." Selena felt her pulse hammer in her ears. She wanted to speak, to say something, but fear gripped her throat. If she spoke, would her voice tremble? Would it make her look weak? Her heart ached with the weight of silence. She thought of her grandmother's words again. Even a whisper can carry the truth. She took a shaky breath, then forced her voice out, quiet but steady. "I haven't done anything wrong." The cabin stilled. All eyes turned toward her. Selena's voice trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. She met Claudia's gaze and repeated, louder this time, "I haven't done anything wrong." A murmur of agreement rippled through the passengers. Jordan's livestream comments exploded. There it is. The truth straight from her. Powerful. Ethan placed a hand gently on the armrest beside her, his presence grounding her. That's right. Selena, you've done nothing wrong. Claudia's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she seemed to teeter between lashing out and retreating. Finally, she straightened her posture, forcing her professional tone back into place. The report will reflect my observations, she said crisply. The captain will review it after landing. She turned sharply, striding back to the galley. Her heels struck the carpet like gavel blows. Selena's heart raced, but she sat taller in her seat. For the first time, she had spoken. Her words still echoed in her chest, fragile but powerful. The cabin eased slightly, passengers murmuring among themselves. The woman in 3C leaned forward with a smile. You did great. Don't let her steal that from you. Selena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Jordan whispered behind her. 500,000 viewers. You just broke through to the world. 500,000. Selena's head spun. She was just one girl, sitting in one seat on one plane. How could 500,000 people care? And yet, they did. She felt it in the supportive murmurs, in Ethan's steady gaze, in the passengers who were finally speaking out. But Claudia's shadow still loomed. Selena looked out the window again, stars glimmering like watchful eyes. She whispered to herself, I belong here. This time, the words felt stronger, steadier. The engines roared beneath them, carrying the plane forward through the night. The cabin felt divided. But for the first time, Selena felt the balance tipping not toward silence, but toward truth. Cliffhanger. As the cabin settled again, a new voice crackled over the intercom. It wasn't Claudia's or the captain's. It was a different crew member, hesitant but clear. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to inform you that senior management has been notified of a developing situation on board. The intercom announcement hung in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Senior management has been notified of a developing situation on board. Selena's pulse quickened. She shifted in her seat, her small hands gripping the armrest. Senior management. That meant this wasn't just about Claudia anymore. This was no longer confined to the cabin, it was spilling into the world beyond the clouds. Ethan glanced at her, his voice calm. This is good. It means the airline knows something's wrong. They'll be watching now. Selena nodded faintly, though fear and relief tangled inside her chest. Watching. That word could mean protection or judgment. Behind her. Jordan leaned in, his voice hushed with urgency. Selena, your name is everywhere right now. Girl in 2A is trending on every platform. News outlets are picking it up. I think your dad's going to know before we even land. Her breath caught. The thought of her father seeing her like this silent, small, trembling filled her with dread. But another part of her, deeper down, clung to hope. If anyone could cut through this nightmare, it was him. She imagined his steady presence, the way he carried himself in rooms full of people who doubted him. He never flinched, never lowered his gaze. Hold your seat. Selena, your dignity isn't up for debate. Her chest tightened. She whispered to herself, I'm trying. Daddy, I'm trying. At the front of the cabin, Claudia reappeared, her composure restored, but her eyes hard as stone. She scanned the passengers, then fixed her gaze on Selena. Miss Moore, she said evenly, you may remain in your seat until landing, but you should know this incident will be reviewed at the highest levels. Selena's throat burned. She wanted to speak again, to repeat that she had done nothing wrong. But Ethan stood first, his voice sharp. "Miss Harris, enough. The captain has already confirmed her validity. The more you push, the clearer your bias becomes." Passengers murmured in agreement. The woman in 3C spoke louder this time. "We've all seen what's happened here. If there's a report, it better include the truth." The man in 4A nodded firmly. "That's right. Write me down as a witness. Even Mr. Jameson in 1B shifted, his earlier hesitation gone. Me too," he said quietly. "This isn't right." Claudia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She turned and stalked back toward the galley, her posture stiff. Selena's chest loosened slightly, warmth blooming where fear had been. Strangers, people she didn't know, were standing for her. For the first time, she felt the weight shift away from isolation. Jordan whispered urgently, "Selena, it's happening. I just got a notification. Your dad's name is trending too. People are connecting the dots." Her eyes widened. The world was moving faster than she could breathe. If her father knew, if the airline senior management knew, this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She pulled it out, shielding the screen. A text flashed across the display from Dad. "Stay calm. I'm with you." Her breath caught. Her throat tightened with emotion. He knew. He was watching. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back. She couldn't cry now. Not when 500,000 strangers. Not when her father. Not when the whole world was watching. Ethan leaned close, reading her expression. "It's him, isn't it?" Selena nodded faintly. "He knows." Ethan smiled softly. "Good. That means this ends soon." But Selena wasn't so sure. She glanced toward the galley, where Claudia stood with her head set again, speaking low into the interphone. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth a thin line. Claudia wasn't giving up. Not yet. The cabin stirred with unease. Passengers whispered, their voices blending into a nervous hum. Some glanced at Selena with sympathy, others with discomfort. She could feel the weight of every gaze. She turned to the window, stars scattered endlessly across the night. She whispered to herself, "I belong here. I belong here." Each repetition steadied her, though her heart still raced. "Behind her," Jordan whispered, "the FOA is tagging in. People are tweeting officials. This is bigger than the airline now." Selena's hands trembled, but she pressed them flat against her thighs, grounding herself. Bigger than the airline, bigger than Claudia. She was at the center of something she couldn't yet name. The intercom chimed again. This time it was the captain's voice, steady but heavier than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We've been advised that company executives are monitoring this flight. We'll be proceeding to our destination without further delay. Please remain seated." The words landed like a verdict. Executives, monitoring. Selena's stomach flipped. She wasn't just fighting for her seat anymore. She was standing on a stage where her every move mattered. Passengers exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others wary. The woman in 3C leaned forward, whispering, "See, you've got power, sweetheart. Don't forget that." Selena swallowed hard. She didn't feel powerful. She felt small, trembling, caught between fear and hope. But she remembered her father's words again. Power isn't about noise. It's about standing where they tell you not to. She sat taller, her shoulders squared. Jordan's livestream buzzed again. His voice was urgent but soft. "Selena, the count's past 1 million. Everyone's watching now. 1,000,000! Selena's chest swelled with awe and terror all at once. She wasn't just the girl in 2A anymore. She was the girl the world was watching. Cliffhanger. As the plane sliced through the night sky, a chime echoed. This time it wasn't the captain. It wasn't Claudia. It was a new voice over the intercom, calm, authoritative, unmistakable. "This is Adrian Moore. I'm addressing this aircraft as the owner of NorthStar Airways." The cabin froze. Conversations halted, and even the steady hum of the engine seemed to fade when the voice came over the intercom. Calm, steady, unmistakable. "This is Adrian Moore. I'm addressing this aircraft as the owner of NorthStar Airways." Selena's heart leapt. Her father's voice filled the cabin, strong and unwavering, carrying a weight no one could ignore. Her eyes blurred with sudden tears, but she blinked them back, clutching the armrests as though the words themselves were anchoring her. Gas rippled through the cabin. Some passengers leaned forward in shock. Others exchanged wide-eyed looks. Jordan's livestream captured every second, his audience chat exploding in all caps, "The owner. This is her dad. History in the making." Claudia stiffened in the galley, the blood draining from her face. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, landing on the floor with a dull thud. Adrian's voice continued, calm but edged with steel. "I have been informed of an incident concerning my daughter, Selena Moore, seated in 2A. Let me be perfectly clear, she is a rightful first-class passenger with a valid ticket, and she will not be harassed further." Selena's chest swelled. He said my name, not just a passenger, her name, out loud, before everyone. Ethan sat taller, a faint smile crossing his face. "There it is," he murmured. Passengers erupted in whispers, their tones shifting from uncertainty to awe. The woman in 3C covered her mouth, whispering, "Her father owns the airline." Adrian's voice deepened, every word deliberate. NorthStar Airways was built on the principle that every passenger, regardless of age, race, or status, deserves dignity and respect. Tonight, that principle was violated. I am ashamed it happened under my company's name, but I promise you it ends here. The cabin went silent again, hanging on every syllable. Selena's throat ached with emotion. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to stand, but all she could do was sit taller, holding herself as steady as her father's voice, effective immediately. Adrian continued, "The crew member responsible for this misconduct is relieved of duty. She will be escorted from the aircraft upon landing and barred from further service at NorthStar Airways." Claudia's composure shattered. Her mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came. Her colleagues glanced at her nervously, distancing themselves by instinct. Passengers gasped. Some even clapped softly. The businessman in 1B nodded firmly, his earlier doubts erased. "About time," he muttered. Jordan's livestream viewers soared past 2 million. The chat a blur of celebration. Justice served. He fired her live. This is legendary. Selena's chest swelled with a mix of relief and awe. Her father wasn't just defending her. He was reshaping the moment before the world's eyes. Adrian's tone softened, though the authority never left it. "To the passengers of this flight, thank you for your patience. I regret you witnessed this failure. As owner, I pledge systemic reforms, real accountability, real training, real change. What you saw tonight will not happen again." Applause broke out in pockets of the cabin, hesitant at first, then stronger. The woman in 3C clapped firmly, joined by the man in 4A, then others until it spread like a wave. Selena's heart pounded, tears spilling freely now. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Adrian's final words rang clear. "And to my daughter, Selena, I am proud of you. You held your seat with dignity. You showed the world that quiet strength speaks louder than hate. I love you. I'll see you at the gate." Selena broke then, her tears flowing, but they were no longer tears of fear. They were release, relief, pride. She pressed her forehead to the window, whispering, "I love you too, Daddy." The intercom clicked off, leaving the cabin buzzing with energy. Some passengers cheered, others murmured in disbelief. Ethan leaned toward her, his eyes shining. "Selena, you'll never forget this night," Jordan whispered from behind. 2.5 million live now. You just changed history." Claudia stood frozen in the galley, her professional smile gone, her hands trembling. She tried to collect her clipboard, but even that small motion looked clumsy. The authority she once wielded had evaporated. She was no longer the enforcer, she was the example. Selena sat taller in her seat, her body lighter, her spirit steadier. For the first time since boarding, she no longer felt like a trespasser in 2A. She felt like it was hers, rightfully hers. The rest of the flight passed in relative calm, though whispers and sidelong glances never fully stopped. But now the glances carried a different weight, not suspicion, but respect, even awe. When the wheels touched down and the aircraft taxied to the gate, tension built again. Everyone waited, knowing what was coming. As the door opened, uniformed airline supervisors stepped aboard, flanked by security officers. They walked directly to the galley. "Ms. Harris," the lead supervisor said. His tone clipped. "You are relieved of duty. Gather your belongings." Claudia's face flushed crimson. She sputtered, "This isn't fair. I was doing my job." But the words died as the supervisor's gaze hardened. "Your conduct is under review. You'll have no further interaction with passengers." The security officer stepped forward. Claudia's shoulders sagged, her protest collapsing into silence. She collected her bag with trembling hands, her eyes darting around the cabin. No one met her gaze. Not a single ally remained. Passengers shifted aside as she was escorted out, her heels clicking against the jet bridge floor. The sound faded until it was gone. The woman in 3C exhaled audibly. "Justice," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly at Selena. "It's over." Selena pressed her hands together in her lap, her chest warm with relief. She whispered again to herself, not out of fear this time, but affirmation, "I belong here." As the passengers began to disembark, many paused at a row. Some offered kind words. The man in 4A tipped his head respectfully. The woman in 3C squeezed her shoulder. Even Mr. Jameson murmured, "I was wrong," before moving on. When it was finally her turn to leave, Selena stepped into the jet bridge, her small suitcase trailing behind her. Her chest swelled with nervous anticipation, and then she saw him. Adrian Moore stood waiting just beyond the gate, his presence filling the space even before he spoke. His eyes softened as they landed on her. He opened his arms, and she rushed into them, burying her face against his chest. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But I am so proud of you." Selena clung to him, her tears soaking into his shirt. For the first time all night, she let herself feel small again, knowing she was safe. Around them, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Passengers paused to watch. But for that moment, it was just father and daughter reunited, unshaken, unbroken. Adrian kissed the top of her head, then looked up, his voice strong once more. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. NorthStar will change, and the industry will follow. My daughter's seat tonight will make sure of it. The crowd buzzed with awe, flashes lighting the terminal. Selena tightened her grip on his hand, her heart steady now. She had held her seat. She had endured. And together, they would change the skies. What began as humiliation for a young girl became a moment the world could not ignore. Selena Moore's silence carried more weight than Claudia's authority. Her father's voice reminded us that dignity is not a privilege, it's a right. And when justice arrived, it wasn't only for Selena, it was for every passenger who has ever been told, in ways big or small, you don't belong here. Tonight, we're left with more than a story about a seat in first class. We're left with a call to reflect how many moments of bias slip by unnoticed, and how many voices go unheard because they're too afraid to speak Selena's courage, Adrian's decisive action, and the passengers who finally chose to stand up remind us that silence can be broken and systems can be changed. The shame belongs not to those denied dignity, but to those who deny it. As we close, let this story linger in your heart, not just as outrage, but as inspiration, to treat every person with respect, to defend the seat beside you, to make justice louder than hate. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Join us for the next video, where we'll continue shining a light on the stories that matter.